some breaking news here on the media front. Peter, bring us up to date.
Matt Lauer has issued an apology. He has obviously been silent about this since yesterday morning when these came to light. He says, just reading part of the apology, quote, "There are no words to express my sorrow and regret for the pain I have caused others by words and actions. To people I have hurt, I am truly sorry." He also goes on to say, quote, "Some of what is being said about me is untrue or mischaracterized, but there is enough truth in these stories to make me feel embarrassed and ashamed. I regret that my shame is now shared by the people I cherish dearly. Repairing the damage will take a lot of time and soul-searching, and I'm committed to beginning that effort. It is now my full-time job." Well, no kidding. You don't have a job. So, yeah, he's going to have to do that.
Right.
So that is his apology.
So, Sarah, Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, Matt Halpern, I can't even remember all the names in the media. Charlie Rose, yesterday Garrison Keillor, Matt Lauer. What's going on?
Well, we're seeing obviously a pattern where powerful men are taking advantage of that stature, and they are putting young women who seek careers in their industries in really compromising positions. I mean, one of the biggest, underbellies of this story is all the women who've been impacted here. How has that affected their careers? Have they left the industry? Have they felt uncomfortable staying at that company and moving forward? I mean, that's the biggest devastation of this, is that you have a lot of what would be rising stars now for the first time are starting to feel vindicated. But for many years, I mean, these allegations go back in the Harvey Weinstein case decades. For many years, felt like they were put in situations where they couldn't succeed.
That was like in so many of these stories that are coming out, you hear about women who had this happen to them and they came forward and they tried to do something about it and nothing happened. And the thought of having to look their harasser or abuser or whatever instance, having to look that person in the face was too much. So they would just leave.
Yeah.
They would just find another job and they would just leave, which means whatever you've built up at one company, you have to start all over again.
That's
at another
absolutely
one.
right.
And like that's happened. Mm-hmm. God knows how many times.
I think as someone who covers the media, I think if there's anything we find changes after this, it's that the core infrastructure of how these media companies operate and manage their human resources departments and communication departments to manage this type of instance will have to change. Like the fact that with Charlie Rose, a young woman went to a producer and said, "This is a problem," but the show's infrastructure was isolated from the rest of PBS and CBS, meant that they couldn't necessarily get their voice heard in a way that they probably should. And so it's up to those companies to make sure that the processes are in place so that if a complaint ever comes through like that, there is a way that they can address it seriously and quickly.
Right. And as we've pointed out several times this week, that same process, expeditious process, fair process, open process, should exist in the United States Congress. But of course, does not. I mean, if the media's been slow to act, the Congress has been worse. At least the media's taking action today. The Congress is not.
You know, it's completely true. And there was a movie that came out about 4 or 5 years ago with Uma Thurman called Northern Country, which detailed sexual harassment in coal mines with women. And I thought to myself, if we can't get it right in some big institutions that have structured HR departments and communication departments, what do we think is happening in the rest of America that may not have processes at all for this type of thing? It's really refreshing to see, though, that it's making cable news headlines. It's making headlines all around the country so that other industries, less, popular industries, are getting some recognition that this is a problem everywhere.
One of the stories that has kind of resurfaced in the last 24 hours since Matt Lauer was fired is the firing of Ann Curry.
That's right.
What, about 5 years ago or so?
Yep.
When Matt insists that he had nothing to do with it, but there have been many stories about the fact that he said that if you want me to stay, she's got to go.
Yeah, and we're now understanding this from a totally different lens on Ann Curry's side. I mean, Brian Stelter wrote a great book, Brian Stelter, the media correspondent at CNN, called Top of the Morning, where he detailed how this sort of rocky relationship ended up falling through with Ann Curry's side. Now people are wondering, what other staff members or people were affected
Yeah.
by Matt Lauer's character. And it's going to take a lot on NBC's end to really carry out a thorough investigation to peel back all of the people that were affected. But I will say this is a messy situation for NBC. If you think about it, last year, they held on to the tape of Billy Bush and Donald Trump only to have it scooped by the Washington Post.
Yeah.
Ronan
Good
Farrow
point.
came
Good point.
out
Right.
and said, I have a story for you. And they said, nope. And Ronan Farrow had to take it elsewhere. Then,
This was the story
of the Harvey Weinstein.
of the Harvey Weinstein, right? So they buried the Access Hollywood tape. They buried the Harvey Weinstein story.
Then, when it comes out that there are sexual harassment allegations within their own walls, they take very swift action. You notice that Matt Lauer's producer actually was let go earlier this year for sexual harassment allegations. And so the pattern that we're seeing is,
May I add one more to that?
Yes.
They kept Donald Trump on the air for 14 years.
That's absolutely right.
right.
That's absolutely right. So, we're seeing how, as a network, this scenario is unfolding for them, and they're going to have to take a deep look at how they've been handling it and how they're going to handle it moving forward. I will say, I did think the swift firing of Lauer and then Savannah Guthrie sort of coming out and really giving a heartfelt address of it was a very good thing on their end. If they had acted any slower, I think it would have called into question whether or not the network was taking it seriously. So I'm happy to see that there was a very prompt response to these accusations.